People have just, it's so disappointing. No landslide.
Nicole's coming.
All right,
I'm sure Nicole's.
go ahead and take care of that if you don't mind.
Oh, yeah, sure.
Yeah. So, hello everyone. Here we are in class 6. It's fun to be here for class 6, and we have some fun for you. I'm going to start. I found a box of older stuff from Edgar Swan Wiers, the first long settled minister here. And I'm going to share some of it. I don't have pictures of most of it, so I'm just going to be parading it in front of the camera and then reading from it. So this first one comes from the Unitarian Temperance Society.
Oh my goodness.
Confession of a Unitarian. A tract number 1. And so this is what it looks like.
It's a tract.
It's a
Unitarian,
tract.
Unitarian said tracts,
Oh, yes, we did.
not just Jack Chick.
So, and it reads to the likes of this: my childhood home was one of strict abstinence. The materia medica of that day included liquor, and we permitted its use in sickness, but always forbid apologetically and shamefacedly. My Orthodox Sunday school tirelessly painted the awful fate of the drunkard in lurid charts, depicted the chromatic condition of the stomach at various stages of its decline. I had barely reached my teens, perhaps had only completed my first decade, when Francis Murphy and his own Charles, and his son Charles, conducted a picturesque and vigorous temperance crusade throughout our city. Meetings were held in our church, sorry, and Sunday school, and with hundreds of other children, I signed the pledge card, which bound us never to partake of any kind of alcoholic drink as a beverage. And then he goes on to,
I got it, the last one.
and this is actually written by Wiers,
Okay.
and it was distributed by
Amen.
Boston.
What year was that?
I believe this is in like 1911. It's not dated, but it's around the time that that stuff would have been, between 1911 and 1916. I see the moral forces of civilization with our splendid nation well in the van, closing in on this evil as they closed in half a century ago on slavery. I covet leadership for our free fellowship in the great fight. I can conceive no greater rebuke than that a few years hence, those who will have borne the brunt of battle shall turn to us as Henry of Navarre turned to his friend to say, go hang yourself, brave Cleon. We fought at Arc and you were not there. We have done much, but not enough. Yes, and I did have to make that face in case you were wondering. All right.
Wow.
Yeah, man. Now, you know, his does not, some of the temperance tracts were really like anti-immigrant and anti-Catholic. His is nothing like that. It's just all about the purity of the progress of humankind and that good sort of thing. So that's number 1.
If he was a Christian and he was, well, he wasn't a Christian, but he was speaking.
He was a liberal Christian. Remember we're going to rebuild the congregation in the image of Jesus in 1921 after the fire. Remember? So he's very much a liberal Christian. He's more Christian probably than some of his colleagues in the day. In that era, they were really even a little more expansive than they had been just 10 years prior.
But why is he for temperance and signing the pledge? I mean, if you read the Bible, the New Testament, it wasn't Christ a partier? Didn't he bring 13 barrels of wine to a wedding?
So there's that, is there not? However, this is in some ways, being a liberal Christian is what allowed him to ignore that, right? because, he said you were not supposed to be paying attention only to what the scripture says, but our own reason and understanding as it has evolved over time. And so that's what the Christians who claimed a religious mantle for prohibition, for temperance, were talking about. And this is all in the very fast advance of science, particularly medical science and the science of hygiene. And what comes out of this era that's not nasty, like the eugenics movement, is a notion of public health. And the first rounds of public health laws are passed, and they extended it to people. That it was in this era that you first have to get like blood tests before you get married. It's in this era where you have to, where it's assumed that the loftiest goal is the improvement of your human potential. And of course, that means abstaining from alcohol to them. So that's all part of that. The next thing comes from 1914. I don't think I have anything older. I think everything else is around this time. A lot of this is around his death, so I'm not going to. This is from the Ladies' Home Journal.
Whoa.
Oh, my goodness.
1914. Let me do this for the recording's sake. 1914. An effective suburban church. The story of its varied efforts to bring about a common brotherhood. This is great. The article starts off great. It's actually pretty good writing. A small boy timidly ascended the brownstone steps that led to the entrance of the pretty church building of Unity Church, Montclair. Please, he said to a lady standing beside him, I'm looking for Montclair Utility Church. And the woman smiled broadly. You found it, son, she answered. The story was too good to keep, and the church member told it to the pastor. The Reverend Edgar Swan Wiers told it to his delighted congregation, and the congregation retold it to the townsfolk. The name of the church is really Unity Church, but the small boy's sobriquet is far more fitting. I don't know why I speak English when I do this, but it's something about, just bear with me. I hope it's not too bad. Unity Church of Montclair is a town factor and a town father. It has originated and fostered more town activities than any other town agency. It posts as its motto, nothing human is alien to me. That motto.
That's nice.
Yeah. Today, it is the largest Unitarian church in New Jersey with a membership of about 300. So this is 10, 17 years after its founding. Mr. Wiers came to be its pastor 8 years ago. Its membership was about 90. So he grew by 210 in 8 years. It had a liberal policy, but its activities were church activities. Montclair is a beautiful, wealthy, and philanthropic city. It has established children's homes, day nurseries, penny providence societies, an anti-tuberculosis movement, and a good settlement house. Its philanthropies are so numerous that it had to establish a clearinghouse to keep them from conflicting. One day, said Mr. Wiers, I sat and looked out of the window and I saw that the yard of the church was full of children running about aimlessly, doing nothing. They were not poor children. They were the sons and daughters of the tradespeople about, but they hadn't anywhere to play just the same. Then it dawned on me that we needed a playground for those children. And that area was the area right outside his window, outside the minister's study, adjacent to our sanctuary.
Yeah.
Mr. Wiers told his congregation about the need for a playground, and one of the church members, Miss Washburn, made a census of children in nearby streets. Count the children running about. That's not in the article. In one block, she found 60 playing wiffle ball and stuff, screaming and hollering. Mr. Wiers presented her figures to his astonished congregation, consented to open the playground in the backyard of the church. The church members agreed to stand the expense of equipment and to be satisfied with an average attendance of 35. That's just a funny line for some reason to me. Like they were taking attendance. The playground was put in order, and Miss Washburn, a trained teacher, volunteered to take charge. All summer, the attendance averaged 80. For 3 years, the church ran the playground, and at the end of that time, the Board of Education agreed to transfer the equipment to the school grounds opposite. So that would be over where that would be up there on the other side of the circle, at those school grounds. Yep. On the other side of the traffic cycle. And to make the institution permanent. All right, that's just one part of it. So for 4 years, this is from the next page, the Sunday evening lectures continued during the 3 winter months. Oh, let's go up here. This is better. Let's see, only about one. Okay. So notables whom Unity could not have dreamed of calling to Montclair fell in readily on a Sunday evening for speakers, because most speakers wouldn't have been doing Sunday evenings, who would have been doing Friday and Saturday. So that was the genius that Wiers had for attracting a speaker series. And with the suggestion of running over from New York or Philly or Trenton or Newark for an evening, the committee took care to present as great a variety of subjects as possible, and they excluded none. Anybody may talk at Unity Church about anything. The only requirement is that the speaker be sincere. The first lecture drew a good audience, and the collection taken paid the expenses. From the committee's standpoint, it was a success. And for 4 years, their lectures continued during the winter months. Both sides of various controversial subjects were presented by able speakers, labor and business and on and on. So there's the Ladies' Home Journal. Astonishing. He talks about Wiers opening his pulpit to a parliament of world religion. That was the thing that happened every few years, beginning in the late 1800s. The first one, I believe, happening at the Chicago World's Fair in 1898. World Council Parliament of Religions is the group that continues to do that work to this day, and it's still based in Chicago. All right, so responses, y'all.
I'm tickled at the idea that Montclair was suburban.
Well, I mean, it just technically is, right? You know, it's
Well, I understand it now because we have cars, but in the early, in the 1900s, as my grandmother would have put it,
yes,
there weren't that many cars around.
no.
So how are people getting back and forth to the city?
Hello.
Sorry. Yeah, but the wealthy folks here, but the big thing is that there were train stations. So the trains came through in the late 80s, early 1890s. And so the reason this town was so attractive and all these Jersey suburbs were attractive was because of the train stations. And what happened was this town, because of the way that the geniuses that drew the boundaries drew it, it nestles up against the bottom of what's called First Mountain, which is the first rise of any significant height since the Atlantic Ocean. And so the trains, they initially tried to go straight through the mountain, and they said, forget it. It's easier to go up about 10 miles up. So they made a hard turn along the entire long dimension of Montclair's 7-mile boundary. And so that's why we had 6 train stations. So it grew fast because people could get into Manhattan, you know, in 30 minutes. I mean, today we still can, 25, 30 minutes for $6.
It takes us 40 minutes, but
Oh, because you're in Upper Montclair.
yeah,
Nicole
that's
is in
okay.
Upper Montclair.
Oh,
for the
yeah.
record.
near the university.
On Normal Avenue.
Exactly.
All right.
This is far from normal.
See, I knew something.
No, that was fun.
All right, so I'm going to read just a couple of other things from Wiers here, and then I'm going to hand it off to Sabrina for a little while. I love this one. You know, I always wonder how I can send a message like this, if I can or should send a message like this. Yeah. And this is just from like, almost like onion paper. I'm almost afraid to touch it. I like wiped my hands clean.
Yeah.
You know.
You
Yeah,
can-
that
you
is
can-
onion skin.
Yeah.
Right.
That's what they called it.
Yeah. And so the date I'm going to guess is again somewhere in the late teens, early 20s. I don't think it's older than that. I find myself dwelling upon the third problem suggested under the heading of attendance by Professor McDougall. should we not have 3 committees gathering simultaneously the data that McDougall suggests? First, a committee to study our own attendance. Second, a committee to study the attendance in other Montclair churches. Third, a committee to study attendance in other Unitarian churches. Doesn't that just really make you sing and want to sign up for those committees?
Where do I?
Yeah, exactly. Especially without spreadsheets.
Yeah.
Without cars, right? Now, this material is somewhat in hand. Should not a second phase of our effort include these things? First, the questionnaire that he suggests and some study of its results. All right, I'm going to go past that. So where's the part that I really love? Oh, okay. That's that piece. Let's see. Personally, I do not feel there is any explanation that should satisfy us to accept an inferiority complex and say that Unitarians do not stress church going simply means, to my mind, that they are all wrong, either in neglecting church going or in continuing church services. If they continue church services, then they ought to support them heartily and vigorously. I have seen Unity do too many things that people thought was not the nature of Unitarians or Montclairians to do, to accept any lack of interest in their church as necessarily final. All right. As a third step, should we not plan something very active? I should say a church dinner dealing with this very question, to be followed by or to serve as a combination of an ever-member canvas. Every canvasser of which should be carefully trained and inspired as were the Liberty bond salesman. That canvas should be not for subscriptions of money, but for subscriptions of time. Okay, that's it. And another part of our active promotion program, in my mind, runs entirely to intensive work with our own people first. I believe the question of extension and increasing membership will be on the way to solution. We have made the mistake in the past of starting out on the periphery and working in. Let's start this time at the center and work out. So he's making this big thing for, and there's another one about church attendance too. That's why I brought that one up. And this one's from 1960.
Was that before attendance ballooned to be like 600 people?
Well, we just learned in the other article that they had 300 people in 1914. So I don't know. He probably.
And we have about 300 now, don't we?
We reported 350
Rock on us.
recently. Yeah.
Nice.
But I love what it says. What he says here, that the assumption is that some people think that we don't take church going seriously. And that we've been having that same conversation since I started becoming a minister. All right, a couple more here, and then I'm going to hand it over to somebody else, namely Sabrina. This is from October 12th, 1916. These are Mr. Wiers' sermon topic. This is for this day. The letter is just for a one-day sermon topic. What is at the heart of religion? Okay. While there is not the slightest doubt in our minds that our members have the same interest in Unity Church and its activities as in other years, the fact exists that the attendance so far this year does not show the cooperation which might be expected.
That's right.
Is it true that Unitarians do not place as much emphasis upon the necessity of going to church as other denominations?
Yes.
Still, the attendance at a Sunday morning church is our chief index of the interest that Montclair has in the Church of the Liberal Faith. If the attendance is large, we all feel a spontaneous enthusiasm. The service seems more inspiring. Fellowship seems to beam from everyone's face. Except for our apparent lack of cooperative spirit, there is no reason why Unity Church shouldn't be filled to the doors every Sunday. How would people respond today if I go?
Read that last line there, that's a good one. You remind us, like, do it, add with that.
No,
last
you
line.
know what they'd be like,
Oh,
they'd actually start talking about multi-platform capabilities and their right to engage.
People are much more individualistic than they were in 1916.
Yep.
Yeah,
But I like the spirit of that.
boy, do I too.
There isn't as much social pressure, or we don't
Yeah.
cave into it as much.
We don't cave into it as much, yeah. So the success of a church is like that of a business organization. It depends upon the loyalty and enthusiasm of the workers. Unity Church, standing as it does for leadership in the liberal faith, needs your loyalty and your enthusiasm, continued at a higher pressure. Above all, come to church Sunday mornings and become inoculated with the Unity spirit.
There you go.
And there was coffee hour. There was already coffee hour. I did the research.
You've already inoculated.
You could get free coffee.
That's the story.
I mean, who doesn't come for free coffee?
Yeah.
Seriously. They get those in the county on Thursday.
Okay.
I love our people. I love our people. They send these out like every week. What a labor.
That's
Yeah,
awesome.
they had
For
gazettes
300
every
plus
week in the
people.
80s.
That
The Gazette
was
was
weekly,
weekly.
mailed.
In the
Oh my
80s?
God. Yeah. That's what my
Wow.
research
We used to
shows.
monthly.
Wow, and now we've gone to quarterly,
Yeah.
right?
I've got just one more thing to share, and then I'm gonna hand it off to
The intern.
Sabrina.
Dun, dun.
Was that this guy, right?
Yeah,
I just gave you a theme song.
that's excellent. That's what I need. It's a little jingle when it's like a bunch of musicians walking
Then
behind
I'm
me like.
complete now.
Yeah, cool.
Here's another one of those things that looks like they produced regularly. This, and one of the things I like, and I think that's something I need to do more of, is sermon series. You know, he tried to bundle them, and I think this helped him do his press for them easier too, right? He would bundle them together. And so this is Winning the Life Worthwhile. This is from 1921. It's a series of 4 sermons. Okay, and I'll read out what their titles are. I can't read it backwards though. What is the life which is most worthwhile? Should we seek yet fuller lives? What stands in the way of fullness of life? And how can we magnify our lives? I'm just making fun because I've had a great and very annoying day. It's nice to be here with you folks. Which one do you want to hear about? 1, 2, 3, or 4?
I don't know, like, I'm interested in all of them, like, which one looks most juicy?
Magnifying.
Yeah, I agree. I
Yeah,
wanted to do.
fine, that's
Yeah.
quite bombastic.
Where there's a will, there's a way. The will to power. Nietzsche right there. First, the creative desire, the worthy end of Aristotle. Then the bending of all means to that end, a purpose and a plan. The marvels accomplished by the men of a single purpose. The part that health and physical efficiency play. The training of the mind. The winning of opportunities for education, travel, and human contacts. The relative contributions of society and solitude. The aid of friends. The inspiration of a great example. The stimulus of books. Look through art and music ad, the uplift of the home, the contribution of the school, the value of clubs and societies, the help of the church, the achieving will, the psychic resources. Are they real and neglected, or are they merely fancy? I have bread that ye know not of. Are there reliances upon the unseen through prayer or otherwise that minister to life's fullness? Secret power of the mystic. The expansion of life that comes with responsibility and a great task. The sense of message and of mission and their enlargement of life. So he wasn't even really writing, he's just throwing phrases out there, and how we pick through
Well,
them.
it's almost like poetry, it's almost like what's the word, between poetry and narrative, right? Prose, it's almost like prose,
Mhm.
spoken word, it's very
Yeah,
spoken
spoken
word,
word.
right? Spoken word for 1960. Yeah.
And he says the life most worthwhile depends on what we are and in what kind of a world we are. And we are body, mind, emotion, conscience, and spirit, and all these should function.
Wow.
It's nice stuff, man. It was, see what happens when you don't
I
train.
mean,
No,
considering,
but weed was legal until 1916,
That's right.
yeah,
so there you go.
well, considering what other churches were preaching in the time, this is like cutting
It's
edge,
true,
right?
because you're not just bowing down to this
You're not
concept
just
of a
doing,
savior.
you're not just doing the lexicon. You're not just,
Right, right.
it's week 3. I've got to do, this reading and that
Yeah.
reading.
Yeah,
All right, we can remove my spotlight and maybe we can bring up.
yay, Sabrina.
Do I have the ability to share screen?
I'll make it.
Yes. Oh, if not, she'll let you.
I'll make it.
Okay, let me see. I need to get ready.
Yes.
Where do I want to start? I'm gonna do it chronologically. Because that's,
Yes.
I'm not gonna unmute myself. That's
Sabrina's
No,
not
you're not.
magnified.
Just.
so,
With Sabrina.
so my question was, what, if anything, does this church do for gay rights and the AIDS crisis because
Yes.
it's a social justice thing
Yes.
that I'm interested in. And the reason I'm interested in is that I lived through the AIDS crisis and I have a friend that is HIV positive and was a member of ACT UP, but back in the Midwest. So I know a lot of
Did
that
they live?
stuff. Yeah, they're alive today. Yeah, but because they marched with ACT UP, because they sat at the, Dr. Fauci's doorstep,
That's
literally.
right.
Oh, he was the one. That's
Yeah.
it.
Yeah, he was the one who led the way to find a treatment and.
Yeah, they persuaded. So like I was saying, what is there? And I asked people and Reverend Jan Carlson, and I didn't get a lot of response. And this afternoon, at the very end
Yeah.
of my thing, I
Yeah.
found in a Gazette a thing from the minister that says, 3 years ago, I received, let me share this. Yeah. Share screen.
Can you search all the Gazette like archives
Yeah.
online?
Well,
You have to
the
page
ones-
through them. They're not.
yeah,
you
the
can't
ones
do
that
it.
are-
We're in the process.
Okay,
We're scanning them all first and then.
so it's
there's
very
a secondary.
laborious. Okay, but it's
Yeah.
wonderful they're there.
Yes.
It's an important.
Yeah,
So
they're not all there, but a lot.
this is the thing, from the minister in the Gazette. And he talked about 3 years ago, I received a note from a member of our congregation that revealed a great amount of personal pain. It read, homophobia and prejudice hurt gay people and lesbians and make gay Unitarian Universalists feel isolated and separated from others within our own religious community. How can our church become a more welcoming place for lesbian and gay men? And so he's taking it seriously, Reverend Barker.
Yes.
And he said the very response to that note was to preach what turned out to be a very well-received sermon on the issue of love and homosexuality, which we have.
Oh, yay.
Oh,
Yeah,
wow.
we do. And we have, hang on a second. Let me unshare and reshare it because I have to find it. And it's called Endures All Things, and it's based on 1 Corinthians in part. This sermon, we only have about half of it, so as soon as I can find it, there you go. And he gave this,
Is it Reverend Barker?
Reverend
Yeah,
Barker
yeah.
gave the sermon
You
in,
look so big in it.
yeah, I know, right?
She magnifies.
My life is magnified. So this is
I
the
way to show up for your project.
86?
1986.
Wow.
So the point that I want to make,
Wait, I thought that Gazette was from 90, no?
no,
Oh,
wait, because here's the thing that I want, like the point that comes through the through line of all the stuff that I found is that this congregation, in whatever it is, and especially LGBT stuff, they were at the forefront of whatever it was. The fact that a straight man reverend writes in December of '86 a sermon about gay people is just like,
Mhm,
it just didn't happen elsewhere, right?
right.
And
We had been ordaining gay clergy since the early 70s, but it wasn't until, I think it was Mark Bellatini was the first openly gay man to be called to a full-time position, and that wasn't until like 78 or 79.
right, so, and
And he would have been, Lee Barker would have been aware of that.
right, and so he has 1 Corinthians as one of the readings, the other
Oh,
reading,
yes.
and that's why it says endures all things.
That's
And so it's a good sermon, but like it doesn't end. But basically he's saying it doesn't matter why people are gay, like what could cause people to be gay. It matters that we treat them with respect and
Mhm.
dignity. So that is kind of cool that,
And look, he's talking about considering lesbian and gay clergy in their search for potential parish ministers.
right. And, why bother preaching about homosexuality whenever I've been warned that it's potentially controversial? And there's another minister that doesn't care what's potentially controversial.
Okay.
I mean, Reverend Dr. Fletcher, of course, but like, that's the other thing that is unique to this congregation. Well, not unique, but it's rare to find in a congregation that they have a history of having preachers that are
not scared.
controversial and
They're
not
not scared.
scared. Right,
There's a through line, as you said.
right. And so that's the first thing that I wanted to show. And then, so the other thing that I found, the first thing that I found, because I was interested in ACT UP, I'm gonna give a little background of the timeline of the group ACT UP.
Sure.
They didn't do anything much, very publicized until about, they were formed in 83, 84,
Mhm.
but they started being really, really active and calling people at the end of 1989.
Okay.
Because that's when most people were dying, and then
That's right.
that was the worst part of the AIDS crisis.
Yeah, like
And-
87 to 91.
yeah. And so that's the other through line, doing stuff at the very beginning. So in, where is it?
I remember that time because, you know, people were amazed that Reagan wasn't doing it anymore. 'Cause
Right.
His son was openly gay
Right. And so
Yeah.
there,
and he was in show business. Everybody in show business.
so what happened is that there was a huge protest in December of 89. That was called Stop the Church, which means the Catholic Church.
Yeah,
And then in January of 90, ACT UP interrupted Mario Cuomo's State of the Union address in Albany.
Oh,
So
okay.
like they are from New York State and New Jersey,
Yeah,
like
yeah.
that was the biggest place. And so like how fast did UUCM get on with talking about things? And so what, where is it? Where did I'm sorry, I have to. So, let me share this one. In one of the orders of service, so in the 80s, there wasn't a lot of scrapbooking being done, and
Mhm,
so
right.
all the story you have to get through gazettes and orders of service.
Mhm.
And so this is the guest speaker, Mr. Bernard Rabinowitz, and I asked Reverend Jan Carlson to tell me something about him because she introduced him, and so maybe, you
She
know,
was here that day. So she was like the liturgist or.
yeah.
Oh,
And
she was intern minister, wasn't she?
no, she was
She-
just introducing the speaker. But this is the preview in the previous,
Yes.
yeah, in the previous week or whatever.
Yes.
And this guy, I looked him up. And he was kind of a big deal, Mr. Rabinowitz, because he released a report for the Citizens Commission on AIDS, which is still on Google. You can Google it and get the whole PDF
Oh, wow.
file.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it's still there. And he had an obit that was kind of long in the New York Times, which not everybody gets.
No.
So he was kind of like a big deal. And so he was talking exactly about AIDS. And when was he talking about it? On February 4th of 1990. So a month after these actions that ACT UP did. So that's pretty quick, you know. And so like the congregation was interested, they got somebody that could speak to it, and they listened to the words that they said.
Look at the brevity and the elegance and profundity. AIDS is a family disease. That's the thing that just
That's right.
stands out to me.
Good
To
sentences.
say that.
That's right.
Yeah.
Right.
Simple declarative sentence.
Yep.
Yep. And so that's the thing.
Go down and let me see the rest of the order of service. I want to.
This is,
Yes.
I'm gonna show you the
Okay.
other order of service. This is the preview. So like this is coming next week.
Oh, yes, right.
Right? And so the real order of service is this. And I will share again. I've magnified it to just show it, but like I can make it smaller so that it fits. But this is February 4th, 1990.
Okay. And I have something from the same era to show when you're done this piece.
Yeah.
Because it ties right into
And
it.
I have, so yeah, oh, you have the thing with the welcoming congregation?
What about welcoming congregation?
Yeah,
Did you find
yeah,
that too?
I got that, well, no, that's fine, you can show it,
Okay.
it's fine.
Well, you got it.
But like I just, so. And what I liked about it, there was an insert in the order of
Wait, go
service.
back to the first time. I want to see the songs. All right, the growing light, I've never done that one out of the hymnal.
And
Billy and the Guys,
Billy and the
I
Guys.
really want to know what that is.
Me
That reading.
too.
Song of From All That Dwell Below the Skies, that's known as the doxology.
doxology, yeah.
It comes from the old Lutheran hymnal, old number 100. It's also known as old 100, the melody to
Yeah.
it. Dun, 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 dun,
Oh,
dun,
children will
dun,
proceed to their
dun.
recess classes.
That's the music to send the children to RE.
Oh, and look, RE, it's capital RE. God, that reminds me of Judith. So wait a minute, Reverend Scott, why don't you get us to do Billy and the Guys at one of our services?
Well, I don't know what it is, so I'll have to look into it.
So
Billy
that's,
and the Guys by Navius.
And we need one another.
So
That's one of the
the,
responsive reading that's still in the hymnal, actually.
yes, and that's the thing that I wanted to read.
Oh, good.
Because somebody's talking about AIDS and about it, and the responsive reading, we need one another. We need one another when we mourn and would be comforted. We need one another when we are in trouble and afraid. We need one another when we are in despair and temptation and need to be recalled to our best selves again. We need one another when we would accomplish some great purpose and we cannot do it alone.
Mm.
We need one another in our success when we look for someone to share our triumph. We need one another in the hour of defeat, when with encouragement we might endure and stand again. We need one another when we come to die and would have gentle hands prepare us for the journey. All our lives, we are in need and others are in need of us. George
Yes.
Odell.
So beautiful.
That's a beautiful.
And it was a responsive reading, and so like, I can imagine the congregation reading that,
Yeah.
it's a little bit moving.
No,
I'll let you say the thing about the.
I just have it up already to make it easy to share.
Yeah,
And
And so that I'm not big anymore.
That's amazing.
not for long, yeah, so this is the Gazette from October of 1990. So this is, Rabinowitz was in February, so here 8 months later, this looks like it's the second chance to set the date for the welcoming congregation, and the welcoming congregation is the Unitarian Universalist program to get folks to fully embrace LGBTQ folk. They probably made a political calculation when they designed a program, but I've always found it an unfortunate name because it doesn't actually tell you what it is.
Mhm.
Which one? Which one?
Welcoming congregation. So it sounds more like you're learning how to be a good greeter instead of you're doing LGBTQ,
Oh,
radical hospitality, right?
Yeah.
But that's what they titled it, and so they may have titled it that way for good reasons, thinking people would be more likely to show up
Yeah.
if they hadn't read the fine print. I don't know if that's true.
Yeah.
I don't know who designed it.
Unless it was a reference to something cultural. In the
No.
zeitgeist
I
that,
don't think so.
yeah.
So since announcing the date and time for the welcoming congregation organizational meeting, it's come to my attention, there's a scheduling conflict with the Hyacinth Foundation AIDS Awareness Walkathon. So therefore, the date of the welcoming congregation will be rescheduled for Saturday, October 20th. So because he's a smart man, he realized that
Oh, Wendy's on there.
what's that?
Wendy's on there.
Where?
Yeah.
Who's
Down.
on there?
Oh my gosh, African American in art. See just below that.
Who, Wendy McNeil?
Yes.
Yeah, where? I don't see her.
Right, right there.
Right underneath where I was reading.
Yeah.
Wendy McNeil
Oh
for
my
discussion.
gosh. Yeah. Join Wendy McNeil for discussion. Wow.
Yeah.
It was all over the place back then too.
Look at her.
I
That's
know.
impressive, right? That's 32 years ago.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Go Wendy.
Go Andy. Go Andy. All right, there we go. All right.
And so like,
Oh,
if I may add one thing, the first edition of the Welcoming Congregation book came
Yes.
out in 1990.
oh, okay.
So
this-
the
it's
congregation
right there.
is doing it first off.
Oh, wow. They were one of the first
Yeah.
batch.
Wow.
I just saw coffee hour on there, by the way.
Yeah. Coffee hour.
That's because you were secretly here too.
Exactly. Exactly.
So that's all
Yeah.
I mean, that's
We
it.
weren't
That's all I could
questioning
find.
Wow, that's just fascinating. So let me share a little more about some of that. I talked to Lee this week, and it was
Lee Barker?
Lee Barker. Yeah, I talked to him on Monday. I was a little, I felt really disappointed, but you know, he didn't exactly tell everyone, and he's retired, and you know, and I don't do social media, and he doesn't either. So, he, his wife died last May.
Oh,
I met them when I was starting. He and I started at Meadville the same year.
mhm.
It was his first year as president, 2004. He began a few months before school started. And that's when I started seminary. And he had just moved from California, and I still remember his wife, Chris. Lovely person. And she was already like, you know, she's like, you know, I've lived my whole life in California. I'm not looking forward to November. I don't know how I can think October doesn't look very good either. You know, she and I were sort of commiserators about the winter. I'm a pretty stout man about most things, but I will whine like a baby when it gets cold. You know, she grew to love it there and really created a great business there. And she ended up with like an aggressive form of pancreatic cancer and died in May. And I felt so good to connect with him. And, you know, I was just, you know, I didn't know how much he wanted to talk. So I didn't really, you know, try to keep him, but he didn't want to hang up. He kept wanting me to tell me stories.
Oh, that's awesome.
And so I am going to try to bring him here in the springtime.
That's awesome.
And we just got to figure out when would be
Because
good.
this is a really nice space. This will be good for him.
Oh
You
my
know?
God. Yeah, he shared with me. He started his ministry in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, and he went back there. He said about, you know, 5 or 6 years ago, and he couldn't believe how many people were there that he still knew, because that's a stable place
Yeah,
too. You know,
yeah.
where I served in Northern Virginia, people move in and out of there because of the
It's
federal
very
government.
transient there.
Yeah, but like
Yeah.
here, you know, Harrisburg, places
Yeah.
like that, you know, it's
Yeah.
very stable.
Yeah.
So Lee shared some stories that were tough, you know, like he shared this story about an organist. And I don't know if you remember their organist, Sue, because you were here, but they had an organist who was gay. He said most people didn't know he was gay. He didn't tell everybody. He wasn't particularly flamboyant and out about it. I mean, he wouldn't deny it if you asked him, right? But he was a well-known and very highly talented organist. And this is in the 80s. He couldn't keep a job in Manhattan when they would find out he was gay. He would get fired. They would find a reason to fire him. And he lived in Manhattan even when he worked here, apparently. And he always had a lot of resentment. I think, you know, Lee said he didn't really say it, but he really wished he was working in Manhattan. He sort of a little resented having to come out in the suburbs every Sunday morning. And then, one day he just stopped coming to work. And then he didn't call, he didn't write. I mean, there was no email then. So, and he didn't call or write, and and they really liked him as a musician. And eventually, about 5 months later, did get a letter saying, sorry, but I've been sick, and he had AIDS. But he never told anybody here.
Is his name upstairs on the organ list?
Might be, I don't know, but I'll have to
He
look
could
at
have
it.
gotten so much support.
He said it was like Mike or Mark May is what he remembered. Do you remember this organist, Sue? No? Yeah, I mean, because the organist played upstairs. So he a lot of the congregation may have never seen him because of where they put the organ in this building, right?
Oh, the young person up there.
That's right.
Go in.
Exactly. And
That's
so,
another skill set.
but there's a twist.
What's the twist?
So a couple months after that, this same organist appeared on the cover of the New York Post. And the New York Post was just as wacky and out there as it is today.
Yeah.
And it was his picture, and it said, "I cured myself of AIDS." So he must, some people when they got Kaposi sarcoma, which is the most common ailment that you actually died of from AIDS, it actually affected your brain. You would get delusional, you can get delusional from that. And so, they did this whole article on him about how he had cured himself from AIDS, and he talked about how hard it was to keep a job. And he talked about how hard it was to keep his job here. And Lee was like, we never fired you. You stopped coming. He was still a little frosty about that, which is kind of funny. I've never known him to hold on to things, but he was like,
That would be,
like-
that would piss me off.
but it's like, what do you mean? You never told me you were sick.
It
We didn't
doesn't
fire
look good
you.
for the church.
But whatever. It was the New York Post. Most people heard it.
Yeah, they're so wacky. They're so
But if you're fighting AIDS and you have to come from Manhattan to Montclair on a Sunday,
Yeah.
that's, that's, I can see where that would be an issue. And
Yeah.
even though he wasn't fired, he couldn't make the job.
That's right. But
Right.
that's what was in the paper. Whether, because it's the New York Post, whether
Well,
we
he took
said
the
it or not.
train, right? He took the train.
He took the train. That's how he got out here, most likely, I
Yeah.
guess. I mean,
Yeah.
by the 90s, people were probably taking it. The Sunday morning
Everyone-
traffic wasn't crazy.
No, people were taking the train.
Of course, yeah.
Training for that parking.
Another room of parking.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Anyway,
And he
so
could walk to the congregation.
that's
from
right,
there.
from Bay Street, that's right. So probably that was funny, that might have still been Lackawanna. But anyway, so there we go. And wow. But Lee also said that he loved the congregation's embrace of the Welcoming Congregation program, and that he really expected a whole lot more resistance than he got.
Mhm.
He said there were a couple of people who stirred up about it, and he said once, and he just, because he didn't really let the resistance deter him. And
Yeah,
he said once they did the program, he never heard anything about it again in a negative way, So, the program accomplished what it was supposed to accomplish, was to really challenge folks as a spiritual discipline to think differently about, a whole class of human beings, in this case, LGBTQ.
I saw that sentence when Sabrina was showing it, and it
Mhm.
said something that he was pleasantly surprised about the
Yeah.
change in the behavior
Mhm.
of the
Mhm.
congregation,
Mhm.
like the subtle nuances. And that just rings so true to how things happen, right?
And not long after all of that, he brought on an openly gay staff member, John Tolley, who at first was as a religious educator.
Mm.
And he got a couple of questions. Oh, you got a gay staff member, okay, but he's working with children. And he said right away, he's not interested in your damn children. He's interested in having a ministry. And he said it was a couple of people. And once they met, if you ever met John Tolley, he's the most lovable man in the world. He was a theater guy. He was an arts and ministry guy who actually was a member of a more conservative theological church in Indianapolis. And he got fired because he was gay. And he became a Unitarian Universalist. And he was going to Drew, and that's how he met Lee. I guess he might have started coming to church here and inquiring, and they needed somebody.
Mm.
Yeah, so Tolley ended up, doing that, and mostly became an educator after he worked here teaching arts and ministry. And it was one of my professors at Meadville, actually. I have a really fun story about John Tolley. I'm not sure I should tell it. Yeah, it's a little too risque. It's not like a Neil Gertis story, which I definitely wouldn't tell in class, after class maybe. But
Okay.
but John Tolley was just, he has a fabulous partner that they've been together for a long time, and they really he's really been a great gift to teaching how to bring the arts and ministry together, and it reminded me of that Ossie Davis message here, arts is a fulcrum for civil rights, right? And the
Yeah.
history of this congregation, being so, indebted to the arts.
Right,
Yeah.
right.
So I think all of that is just fascinating stuff. I want to stop here for any questions or observations or comments. And hello, Amy Crafton. I see you joined us from the northwest corner of our state.
Okay, I'm having massive technical issues. I'm sorry, I'm just issues, but anyway. Hi, thank you for having this class.
Jeez.
Avery's entering the building right now as you speak, so if you guys see,
Avery's coming here.
yeah,
Yeah.
he's returning some stuff to the building, but so if you hear a little mouse in the sanctuary, he's there.
Oh, cool. He just wanted an excuse to go for a long drive, right?
Yeah.
He just got his driver's license.
Oh, that's great. How you doing, Amy?
For those who don't
Now,
know.
I have a very strong higher power God thing. And
Rock.
Avery has his own and it's not mine and we'll all be fine. Just look both ways before you all cross the street.
Okay. Thanks for that.
My car's in the driveway, is it safe?
All right, maybe think of this one. You probably know this one, Amy. You mentioned issues. You know, issues are like tissues. They keep coming up.
Oh, except they're soggy and they disintegrate in the laundry. So do issues, right?
I love that. That was clever.
Yeah. I learned that from the recovery community, actually.
Wow.
A friend of mine was involved with the recovery community back in Maryland, and that was one of the things she would always say. Issues are like tissues. All right, all the people that give us all the wonderful things that we can never forget in our lives. All right, what are we going to look at next? Do you have anything else that you
Oh,
want
I
to
have
share?
one thing that I don't have a screenshot or anything of
Sure.
it. But when I was going through the Gazette, it became clear to me that the parking lot next door was free on Sundays in the 80s.
It was free.
Yeah, that is all I
Oh, that's crazy.
But
Yeah.
you
And
guys
now-
know the story, right?
We tell us,
What's the
Amy.
story?
Oh, we have to be careful how we stored the UU. That's all I have to say. The people, our elders, I don't know, it was in the 50s, maybe, I think. They decided that the parking lot was not a good investment. It came up to be for sale.
It was the
So-
60s.
60s, thank you.
And yeah,
Remember that, Sue?
So, yeah.
We all make mistakes.
that we could
they-
have bought it for $6,000.
Oh my
I-
gosh.
It
That
could-
we could have been making so much money off
Wait
of
a
that,
second. It couldn't have been just 6,000.
right?
It had to be more than that.
It was
In the 60s?
$6,000.
In the 60s, that's about right. You
No,
could actually
six.
buy it.
That was a-
Because it just sold for 7.4 million
Of course it did.
before they just started construction on the new building going up there on Monday.
Oh, yeah, it sounds wonderful here now.
Well,
Just
as
what
long
you
as it-
need, more buildings and less parking.
That's what we said.
Exactly,
Right.
exactly.
But you know what? It's because people who come from other towns don't want to walk. All you have to do is park a few blocks down. and
Or in the
walk.
parking garages, there's 5
I
parking
mean,
garages within 5 blocks.
You just walk, like it's
Mhm.
like we have
Oh,
blocks and
absolutely.
sidewalks.
Like, I know.
and
Everyone's not as sensible as you, Cole.
They're just,
And
but that's how we
Nicole,
walk.
Nicole,
That's money,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Everyone's not as physically able.
Right, that's
thank
right.
you, Mary. I was gonna,
Okay,
I was gonna
fine.
ask Nicole if she's gonna help push me up the stairs to get me in church when I do get there.
I am very helpful. Like if I see someone who needs help, I'm always willing to lend a hand. That's my general. task. And every one of Montclair's like that, mainly, and mainly.
Well, Foxy, on
So I
Sundays,
would do it, yeah.
handicap park is a driveway on Sundays.
Yeah, you
Yeah.
park in the driveway.
Oh,
And
yeah.
I would
Yeah,
just
but
throw
that's
you-
still not gonna get me upstairs.
I'll throw you over my
But
shoulder.
we have people
All right.
just trying to be macho. and Foxy.
Yeah, but I'm good. All right, let's, so you had something else?
No, that's
Oh, the
all,
parking
like,
lot thing?
that they let people at the church park
Park
for
for
free,
free, yeah,
only on
yeah.
Sunday.
Thank you
So-
for clarifying. I heard it was 75,000, so it really was only 6. That makes sense, because my parents' house in 1962 was $5,200, so.
Yeah,
No.
that's what I was saying is about that time, $6,000 would buy you a nice house.
Yeah, yeah,
Oh,
yeah.
so it's
Yeah.
a lot of money.
Yeah, I do have something else.
Good.
The intern.
Oh, yeah, share
Yeah.
your.
Like,
opinion.
so, I met with Jane and Sheila Eby, who's a member of the congregation for a
Yeah.
long time.
Yeah.
And because during the presentation from the archives, all these names of ministers that had been interns or members of the congregation came up. And so what we're gonna do, hopefully, is send all these people questionnaire, like a Google questionnaire, and see if they wanna be interviewed on camera,
Wow,
say something, tell us a story about their like the real interns.
that's awesome.
There was an intern during, the research that I did for the AIDS talk. Her name, I don't remember her name, but like they hosted interns even before there was a program for it. So we're gonna try to reach out to everybody and see
That's
if they want to
fantastic.
offer something. Sheila would like them to come and preach or to come and, but I think
Does
some
Sheila
of
know a lot of them?
No. that just the ideally would be good too.
Yeah.
Margaret
yeah.
Beard came out of this congregation.
Yep, and we talked about her. and so-
When Johnson was
Yeah.
her, and then
Yeah,
did Kimberly serve her internship here? I don't think so.
no, but she did her
Yeah,
her convocation here, right?
Yeah,
Her
yeah.
Ordination,
Ordination.
she did her.
yeah, because she was from here.
Yeah.
I mean,
Which
that was
Rosemary
beautiful.
and Cheryl and Wendy Toha, a lot of women of color.
And Terry, right? Terry?
Oh yeah, Terry Cummings. Oh yeah.
Yeah.
So we're gonna put it together and
Right.
that way the archives will have kind of data on that they
Yeah,
can
that would be
use
cool.
whichever way they want. And tentatively, though I'm not sure about that, we may do a thing after service.
Sure.
Awesome.
And we're gonna try to involve Jerry so he can make the movie of all the interviews.
Jared's really excited about this stuff. You'll have to tell
He
him
doesn't know yet.
when to stop. That's okay.
Amazing. He will be
So-
all over. That
Yeah.
sounds amazing.
So the other thing you should know is that there's been internships through the seminaries for a very long time. There wasn't an official internship program through the UUA. So if normally when you came out, you could kind of just serve, but most of the Meadville and Stark King and Harvard Divinity and places where most of our ministers came from had internships, but it wasn't a clearinghouse. It was a little more, like a bishop. So you would get an envelope at the end of this year telling you, and usually the president of the school or somebody, a dean at the seminary, would sit you all down and you get an envelope of where you were going. You had very little choice in it.
Oh,
Yeah.
wow. Do you have choice now?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah. There were a lot of congregations looking when I applied. I didn't apply to all of them.
Yeah.
I mean,
Makes sense.
and it, like you try to look for a match in interest in what, the congregation does. I also heard that at some point before the clearinghouse, people that knew people, like it was like word of mouth when the envelope stopped, just people were just sent out. If you knew somebody that had a church, like it was a settled minister,
Yeah.
then you could ask them that kind of thing.
Wow.
And
Yeah.
so, that changed because obviously there's some justice issues there, and there's not much accountability. And there's the notion that system really rewards the extroverts because, lots of people and know how to make
Yeah.
an impression,
Yeah.
are going to be remembered. And,
Yeah.
to be honest, our current search process also, I think, rewards extroverts more than
Really?
it should. It definitely does. Our search process, not our internship process, our search to find a called minister.
Got
You
it.
really have got to be, even though the congregations will tell you that's not what they're looking for, you've
Yeah.
got to put on a show when you're interviewed and when you pre-candidate. You've got to put on a good
Yeah.
show.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be the kind of show I put on, but you've got.
That's a good show though. That's you.
Well,
Keep showing up as
well,
yourself.
I appreciate that. So, because not everybody thinks that, but that's true. And so I always worry about that because, I happen to be married to an introvert who actually is, she's tested more and more extrovert the longer she's been in ministry.
Yeah,
Oh,
yeah,
I
it makes
see
sense.
I can
That
see
makes
that.
sense.
But when she and I did our tests in seminary, I was like 33 extrovert and she was like 30 introvert,
Oh.
right? And now she's like right in the middle and I'm only down to like 29 extrovert.
I mean,
Don't let
because
anything diminish your wine.
the more you stay in front of people, the
It's
more
true.
the easier it gets. I mean.
Easier it
I'm
gets.
also an introvert.
I always think those things are not always baked in qualities. They change over
Oh,
time, the more you
absolutely.
get used to it, but still.
And there may be some areas where you're a standard introvert and other
Yep.
niche areas where you're extrovert, right?
That's right. Same for me.
I'm both.
Yeah.
The most, if I don't know
Yeah.
anybody, I'm very quiet and backwards and.
But if you know someone, you are like on.
Yeah, and when I'm the kind of person, because I am so energetic and extroverted, that people don't believe me when I tell them I need to be left alone.
Right.
If
Yeah.
I say I'm tired and I need to go away, I really do.
Yep.
Because I don't normally say that, but if
Yeah.
I'm like, I gotta go, I really do. I'm about to
Yeah.
crash. 'Cause
Yeah.
I don't see it coming. And then I feel it and it's
Totally.
like,
And done. There was no
Totally, yeah.
warning.
yeah.
Yeah.
Anyway, so that's not exactly our class.
So anyway, yeah.
We're off topic.
So anyway, look for that thing in May.
Thank
Yay.
you, Sabrina. That's
This
a
is
great
fantastic.
service to
Thank you.
us. And you know, it would be interesting to see, I imagine by Fletcher's time, because of how much was happening in and through this congregation, there must have been interns. There must have been. Susan Spaniel, do you remember there being any intern ministers when you were here back in the 60s or early 70s during Fletcher's time?
Not during Fletcher's time.
Okay.
No.
Okay. You remember
And
like any-
not that I remember.
Yeah,
Yeah, I had 2 young children, so.
oh, yeah.
Yeah.
So Susan, do you remember Linda DeSantis?
Oh, yeah. Yes.
What
And I
about Joe?
remember Craig Hirschberg.
Yes, oh, I forgot Craig came through here.
Craig was a member here and went to Drew and had 2 or 3, I guess 3 children, 2 girls and a boy. And she lived right down the street from me.
Mhm. What about Joe Ellen Willis?
I remember her too. And she went out to Missouri as a minister.
Oh, okay, awesome. What can you tell us about Joe Ellen or about Craig back in the day?
Oh, well, Craig was a president of the church here
Mhm.
before. And
What a useful skill.
she was very, very friendly. And then she went on to do what what's his name is doing now. He's
yeah.
a minister.
Yeah, she started
Yeah.
doing interim. She helped that Somerset congregation get founded, and then she did interims for a while, and she's retired now. I've been to her
Yeah,
house.
but she also worked as at the for the New Jersey.
Oh, yeah, the Faith Action Group.
You.
Yep. Yep. Yeah. Thanks,
I mean,
Sue.
I followed her, comings and goings,
Yeah, nice. Cool.
because
Awesome.
we were friends, but
Cool.
Nice.
Nice.
Thank you.
Hmm.
So little news, I went to All Souls last weekend. I have to be in New York for the next couple of Sundays. And we have a little, first of all, it's really hard to have a community there because it's a city church and I had no idea. People are standing in line for the bathroom and they don't really talk or anything. It's like being in New York City, which it was. And then I did speak to just the woman I was sitting next to, and she was a longtime member, but I told her that, my family was active at Montclair, and she's like, you guys have a very vital, vivid congregation out there. And so that was nice to hear. The music there was off the charts, phenomenal. They have a full organ, really good condition. They played this Bach fugue in D, which is just like, off the charts. They had a music director who conducted the sanctuary during hymns, which I found kind of funny. Because it's, you know, it's a control issue. I don't know. But the choir, I swear to you, there were like 30 people there, and the unisons and the harmonies were off the charts. It was like going to Lincoln Center. It was
Yeah.
crazy. I
There's
have
a
no
lot
idea
of-
what the budget is. What?
There's a lot, well, it's not just paid people. A lot of those choir members and musicians are members of the professional
Right.
choirs and you know, Philharmonic and all that in New York City.
Yeah, well, it showed because that's where they can draw from. But
That's right.
anyway, having a quote little community church like we are, I'm just listening to, you know, Susan talk about, oh yeah, I remember so and so. You know, in New York, it was so weird. People just weren't really talking. They were still New Yorkers, even in the church.
That's very interesting. I've had weird experiences there myself, you know. Somebody really did not like my sermon I gave there a couple years back, and made sure they told everybody on the staff never to have me back again.
Wow.
Wow.
And I think mostly he didn't like it because I tried to encourage them to clap on the 2 and the 4 during the hymns. I don't think it was actually my sermon, but they have a very sort of
Aloof.
measured. Yeah, they have a measured and aloof senior minister. I mean, Galen Gingrich, you know, no one would call him warm or fuzzy. And
He wasn't there.
who was preaching? Was it all day?
I have it upstairs. I'm sorry.
Was it Aldette Fulbright?
Yes.
Auburn haired, a woman, yeah. She changes it a lot, maybe different colors, but yeah, she's awesome. I've known her for a while. Cool, well, thanks. Thanks for representing.
Just
All right,
a little,
go ahead, Amy.
that's all, just a little field trip.
Well, that's cool. Well, I'm going to share screen. This is something I just found this afternoon. So this is from 1933 to 1934. They made sure to let you know, even though, you know, at this point, Fletcher's minister, or about to become minister. This was founded by Edgar Swan Wiers. He was still dear in their memory. He had just died in 1931. And illustrated lectures, motion pictures and slides, the travel course.
Wow.
Just wait till you see who's here. You won't know all the names, but I know you'll know one of them. Touring Beautiful France, Northward Ho, by way of Cape Horn,
Amelia
Earhart.
Earhart.
Wow.
I just found this one like just before class. I had nothing to do.
Trying for the fun of it. That's
Carveth
amazing.
Wells. That sounds like a funny way to talk about someone at Thanksgiving. He carveth well. All right.
Okay.
Sorry. I'm in a mood tonight. I hope.
Yeah. You're good. You win.
So,
Branson de Queue.
yeah. All who know France intimately from travel will have an evening of deep enjoyment touring beautiful France in dream picture fashion with Mr. Decoux. He will journey through quaint Brittany, lovely Normandy, the smiling chateau country, romantic Provence, and fascinating Riviera. For those who love cities and architecture, especially, there will be medieval Avignon, matchless Carcassonne, Roman Arles and Nimes, and the city's the great cathedral. Those who love scenery, there will be superb Mont Blanc in the French Alps. Anyway, so, wow, and you could buy motion pictures inside, $3, $5, and $6.50. 6 illustrated lectures. There you go. All right, and here's about the tickets. And then, so this must have been someone here who attended one of these lectures. One of America's great actors, right? You know, so many people in theater in this town. Maybe a member, I don't know. I cannot recall when I've enjoyed anything as much as your recent lecture. The effect is as though you were chatting with the audience, and your pictures are simply perfect.
Wow.
All right, now we have Captain Bob Bartlett.
Wow.
Now that is a face.
But look at his outfit, like
I
it's
know.
awesome, like
Awesome.
wow, he showed up. That's awesome.
King of Arctic explorers has sailed the 7 seas in every type of vessel and lived through more thrilling experience than the average person can imagine. It's fascinating. Really good stuff. He was commander of the Karluk of the Canadian Arctic Expedition, and when that ship met the perils of the polar zone, it was Bartlett's courage and quick wit that kept the party alive.
Wow.
He was
Wow.
selected by President Coolidge as a member of the famous board to investigate the northern flight of the Shenandoah. I don't know that story. Here's something about Bali. This is from Mr. Ostrander. Remember that these are pages taken out that were initially been folded and stapled.
Okay.
That's why you're a little bit out of sorts.
So he's a little more chill than
That's right.
the other dude. Yeah.
Dutch East Indies, Wonderland of the Golden East.
He's
Java.
also an academician. One of my early anthropology courses, we
Oh,
had to
cool.
read something of his.
Nice, that makes sense. He looks like an academic too. Yeah.
So the Dutch East Indies, that was actually a colony of the Netherlands. Yeah.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that was India,
Indonesia.
Indonesia,
Yeah,
like
yeah,
Bali. Okay, yeah.
Yeah. And Java, so
Java.
north,
In Java,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah. Not coffee Java.
No, but that's
I
where the
know,
coffee.
I know,
comes
I know
from,
that's why
Yeah,
they call it Java because.
yeah,
it's
all good
made of
things.
coffee. That's right. All come or have something to do with coffee.
Absolutely.
Where is your?
I know, right? No, I'm coming down from Coffee at Man.
Ah, okay.
I was just there.
So
I know.
I'm gonna take it. Here's Mr. Carpeth Wells.
Oh,
Um,
wow. That's
Wow.
not stylized much. I love it.
That's very like, what's the name of the movie with Humphrey Bogart?
Oh,
oh, and he's talking about
Like, he has a hat.
yeah, the one in Morocco.
The pith hat, yeah.
Fifth Album.
Very African explorer.
Mhm.
And so, this is all
Reminds
about
me of
going-
Jungle Jim.
Jungle Jim. There you go. There you go. This is just fascinating. And he's
Oh.
in the Caucasus. So that's Armenia,
Mhm, mhm.
Azerbaijan.
Yep.
And south of Russia. Yeah. Oh, I thought you had your hand up. And
No.
here's Amelia Earhart,
Amelia.
First Lady of the Air, whose name will go down in history for achievement in aviation with the name of Lindbergh, will tell in her lecture, Flying for the Fun of It, of flying alone across the Atlantic and of her other thrilling experiences in the air.
I think I heard like her spoken voice, and she has that kind of 1930s through 50s or 60s kind of, what's the word? But it's not stylized to them,
But it's
but
like, it's the private school sound. It's got a little bit of a British accent. thing
yeah,
to it.
and it's very projected,
Yeah.
very, very projected.
Yeah.
And
well, she was a
somewhat
public-
clipped.
Oh, interesting. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So she didn't, interesting. I'll have to listen to it to see the clips part. I don't recall that, but that's cool. And I'm going to do a video, audio for a little bit for us.
Yeah.
And so you mute that. This is sometime in the 60s during the Vietnam era. And there's a mention in here of these 3 people who burned to death. And we all heard about it. So I'm imagining it might be 1967 and Apollo 1, because Apollo 1 sadly burned up on the pad. They didn't realize they were using pure oxygen for their breathing, and it just caught fire. There was a spark in the electronics, and they stopped. That's when they stopped using pure oxygen in space flight.
So what's it they use now?
They use, like air. They
Oh.
have a pressurized air. There's
Right, right.
oxygen that's added to it, but it's not pure oxygen,
Got it,
right?
yeah.
So, and we get to hear, his awesome voice again, which I just love hearing. And you'll hear, this is Fletcher. This will be Fletcher. Yeah.
That nameless pathos, the
Here we go. Here we go.
imagining, our voices are softer, with a winter edge removed, kindlier tones, more generous content in our speech. Spring with that nameless pathos in the air which dwells with all things fair. Spring with her golden suns and silver rain is with us once again. Indeed, and that nameless pathos, the busy thrust of life renewed everywhere, the creative urge manifested everywhere, commands our lives. Somehow, more things are within our grasp, more to be hoped, more to be believed, more to be attempted, more to be achieved. Perhaps you recall those very famous lines from the first chapter of Charles Dickens' A Tale of Two Cities. Do you remember how Dickens described the times and the circumstances of men? Why, the contrasts he employed were so clearly drawn that they could be almost seen as well as felt by his readers. He concluded that single, moving, experience-filled sentence with a comparison of spring and winter, and he gave to each a quality that is utterly undeniable. It was the best of times, it was the worst of times. It was the age of wisdom, it was the age of foolishness. It was the epoch of belief. It was the epoch of incredulity. It was the season of light. It was the season of darkness. It was the spring of hope. It was the winter of despair. And I say to you, that if we could trust one another, if we could trust one another to be as sensitive, if we could trust one another to be as aware as we would like, indeed, if we could trust ourselves to be as alert and perceptive as we would hope, we might end this sermon right here with Dickens' words. He said it all. He has described our time as well as any time that ever has been. He has set forth a profile of each of our lives with their built-in fluctuations and ambivalences. For within each of us and all about us is the best and the worst. Such great wisdom, such colossal foolishness, so much believing, and so great a display of incredulity. All about us, and so very real within each of us, light reigns supreme when darkness does not. As we move from room to room, as we move from place to place, we experience on the countenances of those we meet, and we ourselves bear within us to these occasions, both the spring of hope and the winter of our despair. Well, I was about to say, but we need the experience of hope so amply illustrated by the spring, and we need not to have the experience of wintry-like despair. But I don't know about that. I don't know that I am prepared to say that we do not need despair. There is so much of it that, at least to me, it seems that there is more experiencing of despair than outward reality and circumstances merit. And I wonder sometimes if we don't have a need within us to be despairing. I wonder if it may be true that we need sometimes to feel dejected, to pity ourselves, to return in fantasy either to that childhood time when some loving hand helped us up from a bruising fall and embraced us tenderly, or if we need that other haunting fantasy of regression, wherein once more we see ourselves as losers, martyrs, victims to events and forces that are overwhelming and beyond our control. We return to childhood so very readily that if our adulthood has any one outstanding feature, it is the constant struggle to move beyond childlike life responses to a self more autonomously in control of itself and more authentically centered on the well-being of others. I don't mean to be dogmatic. I don't mean to be moralistic about this. Rather, I mean to suggest to you that it is clear to me that few of us are more than seldom free from proclivities to do as we tended to behave as youngsters, and rather small youngsters at that.
I really want to know what's going on in the congregation.
Our ready accessibility to despair and our inconstancy of a hopeful outlook cannot be explained fully by the very real challenges and the very real disillusionments and the very real hurts each of us does in fact experience within the realities of our living. No, indeed. We have a way of creating the entrances and the exits for the springs of our hopes and the winters of our despairing. It's a game we play. It's a game that we play sometimes consciously, but frequently unconsciously. We color our world with the spring or the winter, the hues of darkness or of light, the hues and the colors of despair or of hope that are within us. On the death of the Russian cosmonaut Komarov, when the Soyuz 1 parachute functioned improperly, Michael Lvov, L-V-O-V, Michael Lvov wrote this poem. To be born to be a man. It is not simply enough. Men die. That is their profession, and that is why they live forever. Make of this what you will. It is recognition of the courage of men who live constantly exposed to high hazard, and of the fact that when they do die at their work, there is a certain immortality that they then seem to attain. It is also recognition that all of us, through our living and through our dying, achieve in measure a living significance beyond our earth span. It may be a noble thought, the kind that encourages romanticists whose ideals are dreams. But for those of us who find the here and now fully stimulating, Lvov's words certainly lack cheer.
Very economical way to put it.
A recent article in the Journal of the Liberal Ministry, the periodical of our Unitarian Universalist Ministers Association, was entitled, Death Enough for All. The lively discussion of when the death of the body actually takes place was reviewed for the reader. We were told of the lot of the senile poor who have no will within them and what happens to them. We were reminded of the dispatch of 6 million Jewish civilians of what occurred at Hiroshima and 3 days later at Nagasaki, and before that, of the Black Plague, the Irish potato famine, the Titanic sinking with 1,517 persons, and the Tokyo earthquake. The author recounted his first sight of death, an 8-year-old boy crushed under the wheels of a trolley car. In the 4 major wars the United States has fought, excluding Vietnam, 378,973 soldiers died in battle. And the author goes on to tell us that further 201,058 soldiers died out of combat. And finally, the author ties together the facts of death and dying with some significance that he would give to them as though death lacked its own significance. And I read this culminating paragraph. This generation, vulnerable as it is to strontium eradication, has lived through such an avalanche of death that it tends to be rejecting of the whole matter of mortality. To remain sane, it must ignore the funnel-shaped clouds of death all around. The genocide of the Jew by Hitler in Central Europe has become a mere statistic. Years of round-the-clock bombing of an innocent country, a continuous kind of pogrom, is politely designated search and destroy. The threshold of death was never at a lower level. Only one thing seems to be significant, and this is the effort of death itself to restrain the hand of death. It is the self-immolation of those who love life for the other person enough to taste of death for themselves. Beginning with the holy men of the Buddhist religion, this supreme sacrificial deed has spread to the source of the violence, a Christian country on a faraway continent. Here in the United States of America, an aged Unitarian woman, a Quaker lay leader, and a Catholic youth have sought to kindle the light of reason by igniting their own clothing. On the street of an industrial city where armament contracts are being fulfilled, to the steps of the Pentagon where the contracts are signed and war plans schemed, to the bastion of peace itself, the United Nations, have these three relayed the torch. Each of these and others suffered and died a lonely death. Unlike the 6 occupants of the sailing vessel Phoenix, who risked destruction to further the same cause, these 3 acted alone. Alone, not isolated, not divorced from the fervid hopes of their contemporaries, these Earth astronauts pointed man's aspirations to the stars. Well, perhaps so, but perhaps not. It is no diminution of the courage of these martyrs or of the ideals for which they gave their lives nobly to suggest that the hope of their cause now, the hope of their cause rests uneasily no longer in them, but in the lives of those of us who continue to live. Perhaps my contention is expressed by the assertion that there are far too many gold stars, far too many posthumous citations, and far too few Nobel Peace Laureates and workers in the cause of peace, understanding, and goodwill.
So I was mistaken. He was speaking about folks who were doing self-immolation, which was happening in response to the Vietnam War. One famous right outside of Robert McNamara, the Secretary of Defense's window at the Pentagon.
Oh, there was in the United States.
That was in the United States, one at the
Yeah.
United Nations, one at a defense plant.
And one at the Pentagon.
All right, there you go. So here we are. I could probably listen to that all night, but I did promise an 8:30 ending and I haven't had dinner, so I'm gonna bring us to a close.
Thank you.
There's
Reverend
something
Scott.
about
Just a remarkable exploration, and you know, he takes his good old time. Sermons back then were average 35 minutes. Just remember that. Next time you're looking at your watch on Sunday morning.
Oh, you looked at
I'm
me
searching
like.
for Diet Coke.
Only 35?
Here,
Our
that's
church,
all.
it was 40.
In your church, it was 40. That's right. That's right.
The Baltimore sermon was an hour and a
The
half.
Baltimore sermon was an hour and a half. It was 92 degrees there that day in
Mhm.
1805. And of course, there was no air conditioning.
Mhm.
And Channing had a ridiculously, oh, sorry, it was 1805? Yeah. It's 1819, excuse me, 1819. And Channing was thought to have a high-pitched, reedy voice. And so they had to listen to that for an hour and a half.
Nice.
Anyway, this has been a great chance to do this work. It has been kind of exhausting at times. I have to admit, this was not the easiest class I've ever taught, but it's definitely been worth it. Next week, you and you and you and you get to share with us how you hope to be remembered 125 years from now, when the next Reverend whoever will be doing something like this at our 250th anniversary to see what they can say about us. So come with something written or something in mind, share with me in advance if you have it written, especially if you're not
Mine
going
is
to
a
be here.
video.
Nicole's is a video because
Well,
that's just-
Smart ass.
Was like
I know.
here, right? Wait, what's this? I mean, now that you see what you all have, well, you're in it.
See? All right, and I'm going to say goodnight. It's been great to have you for this journey, and I hope you all don't voice what happened to the earth. What's that? Earth basically. Yeah, we never could find evidence, or you know, the records aren't as curated by the time you get to the 70s. They did save a lot of the gazettes, which was our newsletter. They were putting them out every week. And in our going through them as much as we couldn't find any evidence of the earth-based stuff, but
We got a maypole.
and we have an old maypole. But the old timers, a couple of them, they remember when Cakes of the Queen of Heaven first started, which was that one of those first. Most of our earth-based stuff came through the women's movement, and that curriculum really began to invite the earth-based spirituality into our congregations. And I know that Cakes was done here sometime right after it was released. There was always, you know, because of the Women's Alliance and this congregation being founded by women, women always had a large say and a lot of power in this congregation. All right, you all take care. I love you all dearly and looking forward to the
Good
next time we
night.
meet.
Good seeing everyone.
Bye, guys.